I never imagined this day would come. The day I realized my own family had been hiding the truth from me. It wasn't a sudden, loud moment. There was no argument, no shouting, no big dramatic scene. It was quiet, almost ordinary, but that ordinary quiet carried a weight I couldn't ignore. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold, and feeling something shift in the air, something unspoken, something I had missed all these years. That morning started like any other. I woke up early, as I always do, and tidied the house before anyone else stirred. The sun filtered softly through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the living room. I smiled at the familiar sights, the family photos on the wall, the little notes my children had left me, even the worn armchair by the window where I often sat to read. Everything seemed normal, but inside, I felt a small tug of unease, a quiet whisper that told me something wasn't quite right. I called out to my eldest, as I always did, "Breakfast is ready." There was no answer. Then my daughter passed by, avoiding my eyes, mumbling something about being late for work. My husband was already gone, leaving behind the faint smell of his morning coffee. I went about my morning, trying to shake the feeling, convincing myself it was just one of those days. Yet, as I moved from room to room, I noticed little things that seemed odd. A drawer left slightly open, a note tucked behind a vase, a phone left face down. These were small, everyday things, easily explained but together. They felt like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't seen before. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the steaming cup in front of me. My mind wandered, thinking about all the moments over the years that now seemed different. Conversations I had taken at face value, smiles I had trusted, laughter that had felt so warm. Could it all have been hiding something? The thought made my chest tighten. I tried to brush it aside, but the quiet in the house pressed against me, heavy and insistent. And then it happened, the moment I knew. I don't even remember what led me to it. Perhaps it was curiosity, or maybe just instinct. I picked up a letter that had been tucked under a pile of mail. The handwriting was familiar, but the words shook me to my core. I didn't read everything at once. I sat there, letting the paper rest in my hands, feeling the cold edge against my skin, trying to prepare myself for what I might discover. It wasn't just a secret. It was a piece of our lives that had been hidden from me for years. And in that quiet, sunlit kitchen, I realized something I had never imagined. I had been kept in the dark by the people I loved most. My heart sank, but I didn't cry. Not yet. I just sat there, holding the letter, trying to make sense of the world I thought I knew. That morning marked the beginning of a journey I could never have prepared for. A journey of truth, hurt, and, eventually, understanding. Before that morning, life felt simple, ordinary, comfortable. My family and I, we had a rhythm that I had come to love. Mornings filled with the smell of coffee, laughter from the kitchen, and the sound of my children's footsteps echoing through the house. Evenings were quiet, sometimes too quiet, but I liked it that way. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Or so I thought. My husband, quiet and steady, always had a way of making the house feel safe. My children, my 2 daughters and 1 son, each had their own quirks, their own little worlds. And then there were the extended family members, cousins and aunts and uncles, who would stop by for visits. I loved those days, full of chatter and the smell of home-cooked meals. On the outside, we were a normal, happy family. I tried to be the kind of mother who was always there, always listening. I remember sitting at the table, my children telling me about school or friends, and I would nod, smile, ask questions, trying to understand their world. Sometimes I worried too much. Sometimes I said things I shouldn't. But I believed that as long as I was honest, as long as I loved them, everything would be okay. There were small cracks, of course. Moments I now realize were warning signs. A phone call left unanswered. A sudden silence in the middle of a conversation. A fleeting expression that didn't match their words. At the time, I brushed it off. Teenagers and young adults often hide things. I thought it was normal. I thought I understood my family. I thought I was part of everything. But looking back, those little moments were like tiny shadows stretching across a bright room. I didn't notice them at first. They were easy to ignore. And so, life went on, filled with routines and laughter and ordinary days. I smiled. I trusted. I believed that what I saw was all there was. And yet, even in those years that felt warm and familiar, there were things I couldn't see. Decisions were being made without me knowing. Conversations were happening behind closed doors. Secrets were growing quietly, slowly, like vines twisting around the foundations of my family. I had no idea. I couldn't imagine it. Every meal, every small celebration, every hug, I believed it was real. I believed we were together. But I now know that even in those seemingly perfect moments, a hidden part of our lives was quietly drifting away from me, and the truth I would discover, would make me question everything I had ever believed about my family. That's why, when I picked up that letter that morning, and the words finally sank in, it felt like the floor had dropped beneath me. Not because I hadn't loved them, not because I hadn't tried, but because, unknowingly, I had been living in a world carefully built around me, a world that wasn't entirely true. It started with small things I almost didn't notice at first: a misplaced phone, a message that was deleted too quickly, a glance exchanged between my children that made me pause. At the time, I told myself I was imagining it. Families have busy lives. Teenagers have secrets. Adults have worries. But deep down, I felt it. Something was off. One evening, I was in the living room, folding laundry. My daughter came in, fidgeting with her hands. "Mom," she said softly, "can we talk later?" I nodded, assuming it was just something minor, maybe about school or work. But she didn't come back. Hours later, I realized she had gone to her room without saying another word. It wasn't rude, it wasn't angry, it was distant thought. Then there were the conversations I overheard. Not direct, not confrontational, just fragments. My son on the phone, voice low, saying something I couldn't quite catch. My husband leaving a room quickly when I walked in. Even my daughter-in-law, who had always been polite, started avoiding my questions. "It's nothing," they said whenever I asked. "Don't worry about it," they said. And each time, I believed them. I wanted to believe them. But those little moments added up. The feeling in my chest, quiet and persistent, wouldn't go away. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one evening, stirring my tea, and noticing the silence around me. Not the comforting kind of quiet after a busy day. This was different. It felt heavy. It felt like a wall had been built around me, and I didn't know why. I tried to distract myself. I told myself I focused on cooking, cleaning, the usual routines. I smiled at them. I asked about their day. I laughed at small jokes. I wanted to believe that everything was fine, but the tension lingered, like a shadow behind the sunlit moments. I noticed it most at night, when the house was quiet, and I was alone with my thoughts. That's when the doubts crept in. Slowly but surely. There was a day when my daughter-in-law called me to help with something in the kitchen. As I walked in, I caught her glancing nervously at the hallway. She paused, hesitated, then said, "I'll tell you later." Her eyes avoided mine. My heart sank a little. Later what? I tried to ask, but she shook her head and smiled weakly. "Not now, Mom." That small, polite deflection hit me harder than any argument ever could. It was subtle, almost nothing, but it left a mark. I began noticing patterns, the whispered conversations, the unexplained absences, the secrets they thought were too small for me to notice. And even though I was calm, even though I didn't shout or demand answers, a quiet tension grew inside me. Something was being hidden. I just didn't know what. Looking back now, those small hints were the first cracks in the walls of my world. Little signs that my family's life, the life I had trusted, wasn't exactly what it seemed. And every day that passed, those cracks grew a little wider, until the moment came when the truth would finally reach me, and nothing would ever feel safe or familiar again. The cracks I had been noticing quietly for weeks started to grow wider. Things I once brushed off now demanded attention. I began noticing inconsistencies that I couldn't ignore. A bill that didn't match what I thought we'd paid. A text my son quickly deleted when I walked into the room. Even my husband, who had always seemed so steady, was acting different, subtle, polite, but distant. My heart ached in a way I couldn't explain, as if I was slowly realizing the life I trusted was not as it seemed. One evening, I was putting away groceries when I overheard a conversation that stopped me cold. My daughter and daughter-in-law were speaking in hushed tones in the hallway. I couldn't catch all the words, but phrases like "don't tell her" and "not ready yet" floated into the kitchen. I froze, my hands still on the bags. I wanted to confront them, to ask what they were hiding, but something held me back. I didn't want to push too hard, to seem paranoid. I wanted to trust them. I had to trust them. Later that night, I found a note tucked behind a photo frame. It was small, folded carefully, almost as if it was meant to be discovered. Or perhaps not. I held it in my hands for a long time, afraid to read it. My mind raced. Could it be what I feared? Could my family really be keeping something this big from me? I tried to calm myself. Maybe it was nothing serious. Maybe I was overreacting. But deep down, a voice whispered that it wasn't nothing. The days that followed were filled with subtle tension. Every smile, every casual conversation, felt layered with something unspoken. I began noticing patterns in how they spoke around me. Certain words avoided, certain subjects changed instantly when I entered the room. Even my husband, who usually made everything feel safe, would pause mid-sentence or glance away, just for a moment, before continuing. Those moments were enough to tell me something was being hidden. I tried to convince myself I was reading too much into it. I repeated mantras in my head. They love me. They wouldn't lie to me. But the unease in my chest wouldn't fade. It grew slowly, a quiet pressure I couldn't shake. I found myself lying awake at night, replaying the moments of the day, analyzing every glance, every pause, every hesitation. Each memory felt like a clue, and each clue pulled me closer to a truth I wasn't ready to face. Then came the moment that made me stop doubting myself. My son left his phone unattended, and I noticed a message that had been deliberately hidden. Just a few words, a single sentence, but it was enough. Enough to tell me that what I had been feeling all along was real. Something was being kept from me. My family, the people I had trusted more than anyone else in the world, were hiding something important, something that I had no idea about. I remember sitting down at the table, my hands trembling slightly, and realizing that the life I thought I knew was quietly shifting beneath me. And in that quiet, I understood that nothing would ever feel the same again. The tension, the whispers, the little hints, they had all been pointing to the same thing. Something big, something hidden, something I needed to know. The moment I had been dreading and secretly hoping for finally arrived. It was a quiet afternoon, the kind of day that usually feels safe. I was tidying up the living room when my eyes fell on a folder tucked behind a stack of old magazines. At first, I thought it was just papers, bills, or school reports, but something about the way it was hidden, almost deliberately, caught my attention. My heart beat a little faster as I pulled it out. Inside, I found letters, documents, and notes, evidence of decisions made without me, conversations I wasn't part of, truths I had been kept from for years. I held them in my hands, my fingers trembling slightly. The familiar handwriting of my own family stared back at me from the pages, but the words told a story I could hardly believe. A part of my life, my family's life, had been carefully hidden, and now, in that quiet sunlit room, I finally understood that it wasn't just a small secret. It was something that touched every part of our family, the relationships, the trust, the love I had always believed in. I read and reread the pages, trying to make sense of it all. Each line made my chest tighten a little more. My mind raced, trying to remember every moment, every conversation, every smile, and wondering if it had been real or just a carefully placed shadow. I could hear the faint sounds of my family moving around the house, completely unaware that the walls of our world were quietly crumbling. I wanted to call out, to confront them, but something inside me held back. I needed to process it first. I needed to understand. And so, I sat there, in the quiet, letting the words sink in, letting the truth settle like a heavy weight I couldn't yet lift. Finally, I understood why the tension had been growing, why glances were diverted, why conversations were so carefully guarded. They had thought they were protecting me or perhaps themselves, but in the process, they had built walls of secrecy that I had only just discovered. The realization cut deep, sharper than any argument, because it wasn't anger that I felt. It was a quiet, aching sadness, a mixture of betrayal and heartbreak. I remember sitting back in my chair, closing my eyes, and taking a deep breath. I let the silence fill the room, letting the shock and hurt wash over me. My hands were still holding the papers, but I felt an emptiness settle in my chest. How could they hide this for so long? How could they think I wouldn't notice? And yet, I also understood that people make mistakes. People fear. People sometimes try to protect those they love in the wrong ways. That afternoon, in the calm sunlight of our living room, I realized something I had never fully understood before. The world I had trusted, the family I had believed in completely, had quietly shifted beneath me, and in that moment I knew that nothing would ever feel the same again. The letters, the notes, the hidden truths, they had all been waiting for me to find them, and now that I was left to navigate the heartbreak, the confusion, and the long road toward understanding what had been hidden for so long. After that afternoon, everything felt different. The quiet of the house, once comforting, now felt heavy. Even the familiar sounds, the ticking clock, The hum of the fridge, the soft creak of the floorboards, seemed to echo with the weight of what I had discovered. I sat at the kitchen table, the letters still in my hands, and tried to process it all. My family had hidden so much from me, for so long, and I felt the ache of it deeply, quietly, in every part of me. I remember thinking about all the ordinary moments we had shared, the laughter at the dinner table, the small arguments over chores, the birthdays, the holidays. Had any of it been real? Or had it all been carefully filtered, edited, hidden behind those walls of secrecy? I wanted to shake myself, to tell myself I was overreacting, but the evidence was right there. The truth was undeniable. I didn't cry at first. I just sat. I stared out the window, watching the sunlight move across the floor. I tried to make sense of it, to find a reason, a pattern, a justification. Why had they done this? Was it fear, shame, a misguided attempt at protection? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I might never fully understand, and that realization made the ache in my chest grow even heavier. At night, I would lie awake, replaying conversations, rereading the letters in my mind, thinking about the small hints I had ignored. Every glance, every hesitation, every not now suddenly made sense. It was all connected, and with each connection, I felt both grief and anger, not explosive anger, but a quiet, deep sorrow that made my chest feel tight. I missed the trust I had once taken for granted. Yet, amid the heartbreak, I also began to notice something else, a strange sense of clarity. For the first time, I saw the patterns, the decisions, the fears that had guided my family's actions. I realized that they weren't hiding the truth to hurt me. Not exactly. They were acting out of their own fears and mistakes, just as I had my own fears and mistakes over the years. It didn't make it easier, but it gave me a small space for understanding. I started to think about what I would do next. Confront them, demand answers, or wait and let the pieces fall into place naturally. The letters in my hands felt heavier with each passing hour, but I also felt a small spark of resolve. I needed to process this heartbreak first. I needed to understand my own feelings before I could face them. That week, I moved through the house almost like a ghost, carrying the weight of what I had discovered. The silence, the routines, the ordinary details, they all felt different now. Nothing was quite the same. And yet, in the middle of the grief, I sensed that life had not ended, that this heartbreak, as deep and quiet as it was, might eventually lead me to something I hadn't had before: clarity, understanding, and a deeper awareness of my family's humanity. After weeks of quiet reflection, the sharp ache in my chest began to soften, not because the secret no longer hurt me deeply, but because I started to see things differently. I realized that holding on to anger or resentment wouldn't bring me peace. It wouldn't repair the years of trust that had been shaken. And slowly, I understood that the first step toward healing was understanding. I thought a lot about why my family had hidden things from me. At first, I imagined the worst: deliberate betrayal, cruel intentions, but as I looked closer, I saw something more human. Fear of disappointing me, fear of judgment, fear of conflict. It didn't erase the hurt, but it helped me see that they weren't perfect, just like I'm not perfect. We all make choices, sometimes the wrong ones, sometimes thinking we're protecting those we love. One evening, my daughter came to me quietly, holding a cup of tea. "Mom," she said softly, "I know we should have told you sooner. We were scared. I'm sorry." Her eyes glistened, and I could see the weight she had been carrying. I nodded, feeling tears well up, not from anger, but from relief. Relief that someone was finally being honest. Relief that the walls between us could start to crumble. Brick by brick, I realized that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the pain never happened. It means allowing yourself to accept the human side of others, even when it hurts. I forgave them quietly, in my own heart, and I began to feel lighter, freer. The tension that had lingered for so long started to fade, replaced by something gentle: hope. We began to talk more openly, not all at once, not all truths revealed at the same time, but small moments, honest conversations, glances that conveyed understanding without words. I noticed my family watching me, testing the waters, wondering if I would judge them, or if I could see them as flawed but still worthy of love. And slowly, I did. I began to see my family not as people who had hidden things from me, but as people who had made mistakes, as people who were still trying, in their own imperfect ways, to love me. I also realized something important about myself. That quiet, aching grief had been a mirror. It reflected my own fears, my own need for control, my own desire to always know what was happening in their lives. And as I forgave them, I forgave myself too, for wanting answers, for feeling hurt, for needing to see the truth. It didn't all fix itself overnight. Healing never does. But the quiet moments, the small smiles, the shared laughter, the subtle honesty in conversation became reminders that life, even after betrayal or disappointment, can feel warm again. And slowly, piece by piece, our family began to rebuild trust. Not perfectly, not immediately, but with intention and care. Looking back now, I see that the journey I went through wasn't just about discovering a hidden truth. It was about understanding my family and myself in ways I never could have imagined. The letters, the whispered conversations, the secrets, they were painful, yes, but they also taught me something I might never have learned otherwise. Life is fragile, and trust, even within families, is something we must nurture carefully. I've learned that people hide things for many reasons: fear, shame, even love. Misguided as it might be, my family didn't intend to hurt me. They thought they were protecting me, protecting themselves, protecting the balance of our lives. And while that doesn't erase the heartbreak, it helped me see them as human, just like me, flawed and trying, making choices in ways they thought were best. The quiet moments of reflection became my safe space. Sitting in my favorite armchair, watching the sunlight fall across the floor, I would think about all the times I felt hurt, all the times I questioned my place in the family, and I realized something important. Even when people we love hide things from us, love itself doesn't have to disappear. It can transform, it can deepen, it can teach us patience, compassion, and the quiet strength of forgiveness. I've also learned the value of openness, of speaking gently, listening carefully, and allowing others to make mistakes without judgment. We began rebuilding our family slowly, not perfectly, not all at once, but with honesty and intention. Meals at the kitchen table became warmer again. Conversations, once cautious, now carried a subtle honesty. Smiles returned, small and real. Laughter came back, tentative at first, then more freely. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning from it and moving forward. And perhaps the most important lesson I carry now is this: truth and love, even when delayed, have power. They heal in ways that anger and resentment cannot. I still feel the ache of the hidden years sometimes. I still remember the moment I realized my family had kept so much from me. But I've come to see it not as a wound to dwell in, but as a mirror reflecting human imperfection and the resilience of the heart. As I sit quietly now, I sometimes watch my family together, laughing or sharing small moments, and I feel a gentle gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons, for the chance to understand, and for the chance to forgive. Life is complicated. Families are imperfect, but love, patience, and understanding can carry us through even the quietest heartbreaks. If there's one thing I hope anyone listening to my story takes away, it's this: even when life surprises you with pain, even when those you love let you down, you can find your way back to warmth. You can find clarity, compassion, and hope. And sometimes, the truths we uncover, no matter how hard, can lead to the kind of love that lasts far longer than the secrets we once kept.